Hi everyone, I'm Dan, and welcome to Voice of Geekdom. This is the latest video in a series which covers J.R.R. Tolkien's The Silmarillion, chapter by chapter, story by story, examining the text and breaking down the events of the overarching plot. Last time out, we learned about the origins of the cosmos in Tolkien's Legendarium, and the beginnings of the ancient schism between Melkor and Eru Ilúvatar. The follow-up chapter, which is a secondary prologue, focuses on giving us more details on who the Ainur actually are and what kinds of relationships exist between them. The Valaquenta, as the chapter is called, tells us that their familial connections to one another are shaped by Ilúvatar's thought, just as the characters themselves are in the beginning, which raises the question of just how separate they truly are from him on an existential level. If we recall back to the previous chapter, we were told that the Ainur were the offspring of Ilúvatar's thought, and that each of them comprehended only that part of the mind of Ilúvatar from which he came. This is important to remember when we examine the essence of who these characters are. The chapter is divided into three parts: for the Valar, the Maiar, and for the enemies, that is, those spirits who were corrupted by Melkor in the Forgotten Ages, following the making of the great music. The Valar are described here as the powers of Arda, and Tolkien tells us also that men have described them as gods, implying firstly that the elves do not call them gods, and secondly that men are perhaps mistakenly applying that label to them. Truthfully, the Valar are, superficially at least, a reinterpretation of the Indo-European pantheons of ancient Greece and Rome, and with many elements of Norse mythology thrown in for good measure, but with the theological equivalency of the host of the angels of the Abrahamic religions. They are celestial intermediaries to the one god, Eru. In an unsent letter to fellow scholar and frequent correspondent Rona Beer, Tolkien writes that the Valar only take the imaginative, but not the theological place of, and I'm air quoting here as I'm reading this, gods. In the previous episode of this series, we used the term quasi-monotheistic to describe Eru's state of godhood, and this is why. The religious cosmogony in this universe is not quite monotheistic in the Judeo-Christian sense, and not quite polytheistic either, but actually probably somewhere in between. For the sake of brevity, we will focus here on only the 8 Aratar, the High Ones of Arda, beginning with Manwë, the Lord of the Valar. We are told that Manwë and Melkor were considered brothers by Ilúvatar, and that Manwë Sulamo was dearest to Ilúvatar and understands most clearly his purposes. Manwë is the Lord of the realm of Arda and all that is. Manwë being dearest tells us that his role in governing the other Valar deals particularly with interpreting the wishes of Ilúvatar from on high. As we were told in the previous chapter, his elements are the winds and airs of the world. He therefore has many servants among the bird life of Arda, and the chiefest amongst those, we will later learn, are the great eagles. Manwë's wife is Vada Elentari, the Lady of the Stars. We learn here that Vada is held by the elves in the greatest reverence of all the Valar, and this is quite well evidenced in The Lord of the Rings too, where she is referred to on several occasions by a variety of characters by the alternative name of Elbereth or Gilthoniel, or often both names at once. Vada's element is light. We are told that the light of Ilúvatar himself lives still in her face, and most evidently she is associated strongly with the light of the stars. We will see at several points in the story that she has the ability to kindle new stars in the night sky and reshape the heavens themselves. It is said here that Manwë and Vada are seldom parted, and that when Manwë sits upon his throne within his palace at the summit of the mountain of Teniquetil, think here of Mount Olympus, that he sees further than all other eyes, through mist and through darkness and over the leagues of the sea. And if Manwë is with her, Vada hears more clearly than all other ears the sound of voices that cry. This near omniscience would explain why, in the Fellowship of the Ring, when Frodo calls out the name of Elbereth, meaning Vardar, during the confrontation with the Witch King of Angmar in the Dell at Weathertop, Vardar, we presume, is able to hear Frodo's invocation, and the Witch King is successfully driven away by the Ring-Bearer in that moment, almost by the power of the name alone. We also learn in this passage that Vardar once rejected Melkor, in the beginning of time and before the singing of the music. We are left to wonder what Melkor's proposal was in that moment, but one suspects that this may be another flaming branch of Melkor's fierce, burning jealousy of his brother Manwë. Next up, Ulmo, the Lord of Waters, is described very much in terms according to his elemental nature. Ulmo does not love to walk upon land and will seldom clothe himself in a body after the manner of his peers. Not only does he not often walk upon land, but rarely does he spend much time with the other Valar either. He is solitary and unmarried. If Manwë is the power closest to Ilúvatar, Ulmo is the power closest to elves and men, often interceding in events in Middle-earth and interacting directly with both races of the children, especially during the period of Middle-earth history which the Silmarillion largely focuses on. Tolkien's physical description of Ulmo in this entry, as seen by the children whenever he does choose to manifest himself, is awe-inspiring. If the children of Eru beheld him, they were filled with a great dread, for the arising of the King of the Sea was terrible, as a mounting wave that strides to the land, with dark helm, foam-crested, and raiment of mail shimmering from silver down into shadows of green. Aulë the Smith is very important and impactful early on in the history of the world, when he, along with Manwë and Ulmo, shape the landscape and terrain of the world in the beginning of time, though often Melkor destroys much of what he creates, and there was long strife between them. It is interesting to note that the narrator also pointedly remarks upon the similarities between Melkor and Aulë, which, if you'll forgive the tease, will be relevant to something we will witness Aulë doing in the not-too-distant future. We can see some of this similarity between the two here already, in the ways that they're described in this chapter. The text goes on to say that both Melkor and Aulë, indeed, both desired to make things of their own that should be new and unthought of by others. Watch this space. Aulë's wife, Yavanna Kementari, the lover of all things that grow in the earth, is the next Valar to be introduced, and rounds out our first group of the elemental Valar. Yavanna's chief role is to protect and cultivate the trees and plants of the world. Yavanna, like all of the Valar, may take many different forms, sometimes appearing as a tall woman robed in green, and other times standing like a tree under heaven, crowned with the sun. Mandos, whose true name is Nemo, is known by the name of the realm that he inhabits in the west of Valinor, standing vigil there over the halls of the dead, the halls of Mandos. There, he is the keeper of the spirits of both elves and men, though the spirits of both go on to separate fates. Mandos is also known as the Doomsman of the Valar, pronouncing judgments and portending future events to the still living children of Ilúvatar at various points during our story. Mandos is a cryptic and mysterious character that can be difficult to decipher upon a first reading of the book, but he is pivotal, and becomes particularly interesting upon a second read-through. In this continuing series, we will look to decipher the statements of Mandos carefully whenever we see this character make his appearances. Nienna is the younger sister of Mandos and has no spouse. She is the spiritual manifestation of grief and sorrow, and her tears are said to have great power. Interestingly, we are told that her contribution to the great music turned to lamentation, and that this song of mourning was woven into the themes of the world before it began. Nienna is not a vital character to understanding the story, but one that is important to the creation myth, as this idea of loss and the strength and hope that can emerge in spite of it is an important concept to Tolkien. Orome is a hunter of monsters and fell beasts, who adores all of the wild things of the natural world and is said to have loved the lands of Middle-earth, leaving them behind him only with great regret and returning as often as he can. In brief, the remaining Valar are Tolkas, the champion and enforcer of the Valar, with his wife Nessa, who is Orome's sister, Lórien, who is brother to both Mandos and Nienna, and his wife Este, Vaere the Weaver, who is the wife of Mandos, and finally Vanna, the ever-young, who we are told is wife to Orome. Now the Maiar, as we said in last week's episode, are the lesser spirits of the Ainur, similar to our 14 Valar in their nature, but with less power and, in general, with a more specific role in the governance of the world than our lords and ladies of the Valar, serving them as vassals or living free in the world as spirits, and rarely appearing to elves and men. There is a small story contained here in this section of the chapter, which takes up much of the bulk of the text. Osse and Uinen of the Maiar are partners, and together serve Ulmo, the Lord of Waters, as spirits of the sea. In the Forgotten Ages, long before the coming of the children of Ilúvatar, Melkor persuades the wilder of the two, Osse, to rebel against Ulmo in return for the promise of his lordship over the seas. Ultimately, this plan fails when the wife, Uinen, restrains him and brings him before Ulmo. Osse repents and is pardoned, but we are told that the delight in violence has never wholly departed from him, which may account for the unpredictability of storms at sea. One might imagine a great ocean-spanning unnatural storm during this time of Osse's rebellion, which brings to mind the imagery of not only the biblical Great Flood, but the flood myths of ancient Mesopotamia and Greece, and many other cultures besides. We are also introduced here, for the first time, to Melian the Maiar, who will become one of the most important ever-present characters in our story. We are told that she dwelt long in the gardens of Lórien prior to her centuries-long sojourn in Middle-earth. In Valinor, she served both Vanna and Este. Finally, mention is made here of Olorin, the wisest of the Maiar, who serves Manwë. Though he has no part to play in the first 2 ages of Middle-earth, he later becomes the wizard we know as Gandalf the Grey. The chapter closes with a recanting of the origins of Melkor and a description of his servants. Additional information we get here includes the fact that in the powers and knowledge of all the other Valar he had part, but he turned them to evil purposes, meaning that Melkor has not the limitation of being made to specialise in one area, and, by design, he is mightier than each of the Valar individually. Which aspect of Ilúvatar's mind it is that Melkor embodies is not revealed to us here, but we should be on the lookout for clues about this as we proceed through the text. Melkor's servants, the spirits which he corrupted and brought to his service, are introduced here too. The Balrogs are introduced to us as terrible spirits of fire, known also as the Valaraukar. Sauron too is introduced here, and we are also given the alternative name for him of Gorthaur the Cruel. It is fascinating to learn here that, in the beginning, Sauron originally belonged to the Maiar of Aulë the Smith, and he remained mighty in the lore of that people, meaning smithcraft and subcreation and industry, which, as the future forger of the One Ring, all makes tremendous sense. Indeed, there is a twisted inventiveness to the doings of Melkor and all his servants, but Sauron in particular may have been his inventor-in-chief at this time. We will see this process of experimentation with the Balrogs, the Orcs, the dragons, werewolves and vampires, and later on with Sauron, in the Second and Third Ages, we will see a similar methodology employed as he walked behind him on the same ruinous path down into the void. Next time, we will start the Quenta Silmarillion proper, with Chapter 1, of the Beginning of Days, and take a look at the descriptions of the early wars between Melkor and the Lords of the West. Thank you for watching Voice of Geekdom. If you enjoyed this video, click the like button and leave me some feedback in the comments below. You can help the channel to grow by sharing this on your social media sites or sending this video to a friend whom you think might enjoy it. And if you'd like to experience more content like this, hit the subscribe button and click the bell icon to enable notifications, which helps you to stay up to date with my latest uploads.